fantasies downstairs too. Oh, I love that. I love how it's like, do you consent to being
Do you
recorded?
consent?
Oh.
Hi, Becky.
Hi, Lisa, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. We were just, yeah, going through the motions of, do we look good? Do we not look good? You know, what should we be saying? What should we not be saying? After having an hour's chat and all sorts of things came to the surface. So thank you, Becky, for being here. I've asked you to be here through Tantric Tools because you have, yeah, I know that you've purchased yoni eggs from us for yourself and also for your clients. And I'm just wanting to have some real, just honest, raw conversations with beautiful women like you who are on this path, like me. And just if you're willing to share where you're at, where your experiences are, yeah, just what's moving through right now, because as we know, as we talked about, it's this ever unfolding journey.
Ever unfolding, and that's the thing, never learning and like fully, never being fully qualified in what we think we have to kind of know. It's
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I love it actually. Every time I order my yoni egg clients their eggs, I always get another one just for myself. I think I have every one now, every color, every crystal. But yeah, it's been fascinating. So we were talking earlier, what I think I might do is just share
Please do.
how that kind of came in. So as I was saying, like I don't actually know how a yoni egg got into my hands. I don't remember someone being like, you should try this, you should do this. Just the way the universe, it just happened. And it completely changed my life. So we were talking earlier about having this rash, well, having this terrible itch all over my body for like 18 months after I had my second daughter. And it was just like being on fire every single day. Like it was horrific. And being to the doctor, and they were like, wow, you know, we don't know the cause of it, and you're just going to have these steroids, and you're going to have to take antihistamines. And for me, who's like, you know, I'm a holistic practitioner, so I was like, okay, well, thank you for that information, and I will take them and I'll put them on the drawer, and you know, I'm going to not listen to a word you're saying and try and do everything else that I knew. And I did it, traditional Chinese medicine, herbs, acupuncture. I had my Ayurvedic consultant too. She was supporting me and they were fantastic, but I knew that the work had gone way deeper than physical, than energetic, and it was an emotional thing. And before I'd had my children, I was a very sexual being. And then you have kids, you become a mom, you kind of lose that identity and that part of you. And sex really wasn't that high on the agenda. And that part of me, I had kind of squashed her into this box, locked it, thought, well, she never needs to come back, or maybe she'll come back one day and we'll see how that goes. But even though my husband and I, you know, we were still continuing to have sex, and it's a good thing. He's a good initiator because we would have both been dry for years. Just, it was never fulfilling me on that soul level. It just wasn't, you know, I believe that you can have a physical arousal and response, and you can have that arousal non-concordance.
Yeah.
But my head always needed something else, and I needed this more erotically charged something, and bit by bit I kind of started moving and giving myself permission, and through the work that I do with women, easing myself and allowing myself to own that sexuality, a part of me that, you know, I'd really quite numbed out to. And like I was saying to you earlier, so I'm into astrology. So for me, Scorpio season is a very dark, very sensual time. And it was Halloween, and my husband and I, you know, I'd kind of had a few months into my yoni egg practice as well. I mean, like, I don't even know how it ended in my hand, but somehow I was called to work with the yoni egg, and not even, you know, after you have a baby, not, you know, not for any Kegel exercises, which I personally don't believe in anyway, for those reasons. It was this energetic healing, this crystal healing. Always worked with crystals. So for me, putting one inside you made so much sense to me. And the more I worked, and I had the rose quartz egg, and it was very loving, very compassionate, very patient and gentle, and
Mm.
helped me to dissolve a lot of the shame and guilt that I had around my sexuality and about, I want to say wanting more. It's not wanting more as such, but depth and educating myself as to actually really what really turned me on at the end of the day, what got me aroused, what made me excited, different positions, rather than just kind of lying there and allowing my husband to, and it's funny, we call them maintenance bones. The times when it was like, okay, let's just get on with it. And I would feel nothing. I'd be totally physically, energetically, emotionally numb. But with some level of consent, happy to just go along with it, I suppose, what, for your relationship's sake, for his health's sake, whatever, but really putting my needs at the back, not even accessing any of that. So when I started using my yoni egg, being like, oh, like she wants to, that temptress wants to come out and play, and like, oh, she's really fucking into being tied up. Like she's really into that dark side's like creeping through. And because I was using the rose quartz, it didn't see it with shame and guilt. And that, I'm kind of into like taboo stuff and what's wrong with me. And none of that happened. And so as I'm working through this magic and with my rose quartz egg, and I remember it, being Halloween, we'd had a lot of fun that day. That was the last day that I took that antihistamine for my rash. It was the only thing that would help me. It was the only thing that was keeping me calm. And even though the doctor was like, take a full antihistamine every day, which I was like, I just don't want to do it. So half an antihistamine every other day for me was just enough to not keep me like hurting other humans because of the intensity of the itch. And I just realized the more and more I was getting into my sexuality, the less and less my skin was a problem. And it just stopped presenting itself. And so, yeah, that Halloween was the last time I have ever, and that was years ago now, have ever taken an antihistamine. And I fully believe that it's because of the work that I do with my yoni eggs, with my sexuality, with owning, with voicing, with no shame, no guilt, and just, being in that space. And so, yeah, but it's changed. And don't get me wrong, sometimes there's a time and a place for a maintenance bone for both of us, but it's yeah, when I gave myself full permission to just not care anymore and just to own it, was really, really when the magic started. And now, believing in it so much, that's exactly what I do with my clients. So I have women on a 3-month yoni egg healing integration process. I call it the path of the empowered empress, because it's very much, it's not just that sexual practice. It's not just learn how to have a better orgasm. It's
No,
it's not that.
all related. Everything's related, isn't it? Yeah, people think that it's just about what happens in the bedroom, but it's every area of our lives. Yeah.
And that's what I had to do. I had to shift a lot of that shame and a lot of that guilt. And even, around being a parent, you're like, oh, well, this is me now. And, I can't be into kinky things because I have to make lunch for my children. Like,
Yeah,
I just,
I've got to be the mother. Yeah.
yeah,
And I also think, one of the things that is amazing that we can do as women is put ourselves aside. We are so good at putting everyone else first, and that's a gift. It's a blessing, but it's also a curse, right? And it's
sure.
like, okay, how can we bring the priority and the energy back to ourselves?
That,
Even in the midst of chaos, I've got knocking. Can you hear it? And
yeah, I can.
and I can hear you had someone crying in the background, and like we were talking about, that's reality, right?
Exactly.
There's forever things going on around us, and how can we come back to ourselves? How can we find ourselves?
Yeah, because so I know, like, I would know if that was something. So that's my youngest, Willow. So my husband's downstairs. My eldest daughter, who's nearly 12, is there. And what I would have done maybe a few years ago, gone into that mother rescue. Hold on a second, something that I really want to do and have wanted to speak to you for ages. I'm just going to put that on pause while I go and look after everyone else.
Yeah.
even though I know there's another adult and a mini adult downstairs fully capable
Mm.
of sorting that out. And so for me, again, the shame and guilt around, oh well, you can't be this wild seductress and also this man. And I'm like, screw that, you absolutely can. Like,
Yeah.
you have to rebalance the priorities. So for me, my yoni egg practice allowed me to really relearn and remember who I was at heart.
Mm.
And since I have bought an egg of every kind, and the G-spot wand, and yeah, just that's what I mean. It's learning, and you can never know enough. You never learn enough. You're always a student, even of your own body.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
The womb space, oh, has so much richness to teach you and stuff we've been holding, since we were children. There is a lot of work there to be done. And again, it might have sounded all about like this sexuality and, oh, all of a sudden I'm just really into being restrained and held by the throat. Yeah, okay, great. There was like some of that to it, but a lot of that shame that came up from a young age, and even like addressing. So like I hear my grandmother, so she's still alive, she's 87, bless her. When she's looking after the girls, I still hear, oh, like, have you managed to wash your front bottom? I'm like, oh my God, don't call it that, please. What are you doing? You don't realize at that age, but the language, and yes, of another generation. And yes, I have tried to explain this to her. No, she's not going to change her 87 years of calling it that. But, um, and this is one of the great things, like my husband's very open. Well, he'd have to be very open to the work that I do, or like I collect blood next to the toilet, for instance, every month. He's got to be open, otherwise there's just no space for it. But when he says things to the girls, oh, have you washed your noonie, like that, and I'm like, no, let's just change. We need to change that right now. And even though he's really uncomfortable, because our eldest, she's nearly 12, she's coming into that like prepubescent phase, that's going to be fun. For me, it's empowering our young women from right from the get-go, and sons too, right? The more they're comfortable with understanding the correct anatomical language, that actually the whole idea about virginity is such a social made up nonsense, that women should be able to enjoy and express their sexuality from the get-go. Like, that's, for me, that's so important. So whilst I can see my husband, bless him, he is be like, oh, okay, fine. And he's
It's
like,
bringing up his stuff as well. Obviously, it
yeah,
does. It
it
does. It
really
does.
does. And
Yeah.
so the whole, I'm like, that's a vulva, darling, not a vagina. Like, let's just get that right. All of that. Because it's really important. We have to re-educate, and we then have to support our kids to make sure that they don't grow up thinking that to enjoy sex, or typically as a girl or a woman, is shameful, or is you're either frigid or you're a slut, and just like enjoy being everything and in between. It's your body, it's your consent, so it's pleasure. Why should we feel shame about pleasure?
I also think it's important to embrace the shame when it's there, because I think no matter how much work we do, there's
Yeah.
always actually, I'm going to share something with you I feel really shameful about. I feel, oh God, and this is going to go online, I think. But I noticed, okay, I'm going to share it. I noticed last weekend, so I did a workshop, and there was talk of incest, and the word was used, and then I was actually in my bedroom with the curved wand, the rose quartz wand, inside me, and I was feeling a lot of arousal, and this incest was suddenly there. And then on the other side, I noticed, and there was a lot of repulsion around the incest, but I noticed this other part of me that wanted to be, can I use the word? I'm fucked by my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like the shame that washed over me in that moment, because it was so wrong and so right.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I can't share this with the group. I then went out and shared it with one of the guys, and I'm sharing it with you now. I don't actually feel so much shame around it now.
Yeah.
But in that moment, So I think it's, voicing it, bringing everything to the surface, because there will come stuff will come up that there's shame around.
It does.
Yeah.
And there's even, and thank you so much for sharing that, Lisa. I'm so honored that you feel um, safe that we can do that together.
Mm,
There is a whole, when we get into fantasy and
mhm.
fantastic, it doesn't mean you want that to happen to you.
No.
There is an idea that because it's taboo,
Yeah.
because the idea of it in itself, and it's more that it's like, these huge like gangbang scenes. Like I've watched loads of porn with stuff like that, and it's extreme, and the whole idea about porn is another thing, and the way that the nervous system and intensity responds to it
Yeah.
is a whole other story. Like I told you, I was addicted to it
Hmm.
before. um but scenes like that, and it's funny because you're like, oh, but you're all for women's empowerment, and yet you're really turned on by the thought of like a woman or yourself like being pretty much like obliterated by like this big group of men.
Yeah.
You're like, well, that doesn't mean I want it to happen to me,
No.
but the idea is really turning me on.
Yeah, and it's showing that there's something repressed within me that hasn't been, and that's why we have all these problems in society, right? Because there's shame, and I shouldn't be feeling like that, but actually it's there. I
Yeah.
see that with a lot of the men that I work with as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's that openness, and again, yes, we are talking about like one far extreme of it, but that is the deliciousness of this work, is that is feminine work, so it's the spectrum is broad and it is
oh yeah,
mighty and it's delicious. And so it could be everything from dealing with having traumatic birth. So I deal with a lot of women that have had, or have been birthed themselves with trauma, and often it is very ancestral and there is a lineage of it. I myself are one of those people. um and you have that, and there's so much richness there to be worked with. And then you can have something that feels at the other extreme, like what we're just saying, like
mm,
incest, the
mm-hmm,
idea like
mm-hmm.
fantasy, and then that in between phase again. And even that is not to be ignored, or for it to feel, the whole term like vanilla, that, oh, that's vanilla because you're not like being this and this and this, it's vanilla. Like again, there's shame around that
Oh
now.
yeah, shame about everything.
So for me, it's, you work with that energy that's presenting, and
Exactly.
that womb space is presenting in that moment, in that day, where
Yeah,
you are in your cycle, where the moon is in her cycle, right? It's so varied, and it's, at the end of the day, it's our own personal journey.
yeah,
So who's anyone else to bring shame?
I know. Yeah, no, and as you say, it's a personal journey for everyone, and it will be a forever unfolding journey. And what's right for one person is not right for the other. I think the flavors, we resonate with each other, which is why I love having these conversations,
Yeah.
because I imagine women that will hopefully be listening to this will resonate with our conversation. Yeah, but it's an individual journey, and it's finding out what's work, what we need
Yeah.
personally in every single moment. Yeah,
Exactly. And that's, I want to talk about the my 3-month container. That's why it's specifically a minimal of 3 months, because you
yeah,
have to allow that journey to
yeah,
unravel for that woman.
exactly.
And she
Yeah,
has to, trauma is anything that's too much, too fast, too soon. So we don't want to then go in and exacerbate that.
no.
So it might feel, oh, but I thought by the second session I would be naked all the time and having orgasms everywhere. And it's sometimes we feel that because it's not a million miles an hour, that masculine structure of do, be productive, get, like, put stuff out into the world. And when we step back and we can surrender into feminine, and we can move at a pace that just feels right, and we have consent and we feel safe in our bodies. So many
Mm,
people I work with don't feel safe with their body, or can't tune into pleasure because they've had to desensitize, they've had to numb out for whatever experience, whether it's trauma, whether it's just identity loss, whether it's whatever. So when we so slowly work, and then actually we take a step back and work even slower, and it's
mm,
that you work at womb space consent, or your body's consent, because you're right, yeah, your mind might be saying,
Oh
yeah,
yes.
absolutely, like, I'm down for this, let's do this makes sense, you know, we can be wet as anything and like ready for it, but actually on one level or not, there's something not quite there, and it's being able to listen to that,
Yeah.
and that's where the empowerment comes from, that's where the embodiment comes from.
Hmm.
You can go to therapy. I've been in therapy for pretty much all my adult life, as you know, I'm a massive believer in counseling. I used to work for that mental health charity, which I loved, but a top-down approach is not enough. It needs to be met with a bottom-up approach, and even an inside out. So when we work
Yeah.
on that, and when we, you know, we work on what's going on for us internally, um but embodiment is such a rich part of this. Like we were saying, right, the cervix, oh my gosh, the cervix holds so much there, you know, and that's why actually that's the next thing on my list, because I have a rose quartz one, but I need to get it from you, the black obsidian de-armoring wand.
I love the rose quartz on my cervix.
So I
And
have,
the bloodstone, the curved bloodstone is really beautiful as well, actually. Yeah.
I'll place my order after this conversation. I love it. I just have all your products. I don't know why I wait for my only eggs to order stuff. I'm just like, oh, I better put that in the basket while I'm here. Save on postage. Not really. Um,
Oh, well, thank you.
yeah, cervix. Oh, there's
Hmm.
so much there.
There's
So
so much
yeah,
there.
I love this work. I'm so grateful for women like you in this industry. The fact that we can even have these conversations, you know, and not be burnt at the stake anymore. That's a win. Um, all of this, just the fact that, you know, you're enabling and empowering women to be able to step in
Mm.
their full magic and their full deliciousness. So from the
And
bottom,
so are you. So are you. We're all doing the same. And it's just so beautiful to be able to connect and share and yeah, and help other women step into their power.
hells yeah,
Hallelujah.
right, that's what it's about. That's my life's work from now on, forever
Yeah.
and ever and ever, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm here for it. So
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to press the stop recording button now. And
thank
thank you
you.
so much for sharing your story, your
So
vulnerability, and your truth with us today.
thank you.